Hi there, boys and girls, and welcome to iTTV. And you're with me, Mr. Joel, your tutor for Mathematics Form 4. Alright guys, what are we going to learn today? Today we'll be looking at Lesson 4 of Chapter 1. And Chapter 1 is called Standard Form. In today's lesson, we'll be looking at what is actually standard form and its use in our everyday life. Now let's move on. What is standard form? A number that is very large or very small can be simplified by writing in standard form. Alright, students, what does it mean? It means that any number which is extremely big or extremely small can be written in a standardized way, which is called standard form. And what do I mean by numbers that are very big or very small? Let's take a look. Alright, in A, 0.0000000123455, you can tell that this is a very small number. Why? Look at the number of zeros in front of the significant figures. Or let's look at the opposite number, which is an extremely big number, 78. Well, don't bother counting the zeros because there's too many. It may be in the millions, the billions, the trillions, or even the gazillions. This kind of numbers require lots of effort to write. Why? Because the number of zeros will make you tired writing them. So in order to make life easier, mathematicians have come up with a way of writing numbers which are like the numbers you have just seen in a standardized way of writing so that we can identify numbers that are very big or small in a standard form. And that brings us to our segment of mathematics in life. Alright, in daily life, we cannot run away from readings that are very big or very small. Take a look at the pictures here on your screen. For example, a virus. You know that a virus is microscopic, it's very small. In terms of centimeters or millimeters, it can be very tiny. Or take a microorganism, for example, an amoeba or a paramecium. These are very small readings. We need microscopic electrons to view them. Or if you look at the third picture, it is the picture of a galaxy. Alright, the distance between Earth and the Sun, for example, they can range to thousands of kilometers. Or from the Earth to another planet in the solar system. Take the distance from Earth to Jupiter, for example. There are millions or billions of kilometers. So in order to write these kind of measurements, which we can't avoid at certain times, we need to use the standard form to write these numbers. So I hope now you understand what are the uses of standard form in our everyday life. Alright, so what is this standard form? Standard form of a number is written as a times 10 to the power of n, where a is any number between 1 to 10 inclusive of 1 and n is an integer. Alright, let's look at what is the standard form of writing a number again. Alright, we have known that a standard form of any number is written as a times 10 to the power of n. So any number that is very big or very small can be reduced to standard form. And it's very important to note that a can be any number. Between 1 to 10 inclusive of 1. They can be a decimal or a whole number, but a must be between 1 to 10. And on the other hand, n can only be an integer. And because it can be an integer, any positive or negative integer is possible. But it necessarily cannot be a decimal. So this is a way of writing a number in standard form. Now, how do we write a certain number in standard form? Well, there are a few steps to remember to write a number in standard form, and there are 5 steps basically. In step 1, rewrite the number into the product of 2 parts. In step 2, make sure the first part contains all the significant figures of the number. In step 3, insert the decimal point on the right of the first digit. In step 4, the second part is an index number of base 10. And in step 5, decide the power of the index number. Alright, now we're going to look at 2 cases. Numbers that are greater than 1 and numbers that are less than 1. For the first type, any number greater than 1, where x is larger or equal to 10. So for this kind of numbers, when we convert them to standard form, the power of the index number is always a positive integer. Alright, now let's look at the first example. Express the following numbers in standard form. Alright, look at the first number there. It's 345.7. Now let's move on to the board to check out how do we write this number in standard form. Okay, now, to write a number in standard form, you must remember the 5 steps that we have learned early on. The first one, make it as a product of 2 parts. The first part, which is in step 2, contains all the significant figures of the number. So if you remember, there are 4 significant figures here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So our second step, write all the significant figures of the number. And in step 3, put a decimal on the right hand of the first digit, and it is here. In step 4, don't forget to put 10 to the power of. Remember, it is taking place to become a standard form. And lastly, step 5, decide the power of the index. And how do you decide that? Look here. Once we shift it to standard form, the point is on the right hand of the decimal, which is here. To determine the index number, move it to its original point, which is 1 step to the right and 2 steps to the right. So because it is 2 steps to the right, it is 10 to the power of 2. So these 2 numbers are actually the same numbers. Okay? This is its original number, and if we want to put it in a standard way of writing, here is the standard form. Remember, this is A, where it is between 1 to 10, and this is the integer, which is 2. You are not changing the number, you are just changing the form of writing the number. Alright, now let's look at our second example. How do we write 7890,000 in standard form? And as you can notice, this is quite a large number. because of the number of zeros that are behind the number. So in order to write it in a standard form, remember the 5 steps. First step, you must always separate it into 2 parts. First part is the A, and the second part is 10 to the power of an integer, which will be decided later on. Okay, now in step 2, write all the significant figures of that number. And there are 3 confirmed significant figures, which are 7, 8, 9. Third step, put a decimal on the right hand of the first digit. And in step 4, write 10, and lastly, decide the power of the index. And how do you decide that? Alright, look here. Now, we have put the point to 7.8. So, its new point is here. And its original decimal lies way at the back. So, to decide the value of n, move from the new decimal point to its original decimal point. And you would need to move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 places to the right. Therefore, the power of n is 6. So these are ways of writing numbers which are greater than 1 in the standard form. Alright, so let's go back to the steps. Remember, step 1, we write it into product of 2 parts. Step 2, make sure the first part contains all the significant figures of the number. Step 3, insert the decimal point on the right of the first digit. Step 4, the second part is an index number of base 10. And step 5, decide the power of the index number. Now, let's look at numbers which are less than 1. Just now we have looked at numbers which are greater than 1, the very, very large numbers. What about numbers that are less than 1? It means the numbers which have a lot of zeros before the first significant figure. The power of the index number is always a negative integer. For example, express the following numbers in standard form. Alright, look at the first number, 0.00751. And now just look at the solution on the board. So boys and girls, this is a number that is less than 1. All the zeros that are before 7. Right, so how do we convert it? It is the same 5 basic steps, which is the first, you must remember to separate this number into 2 parts as a product of A times 10, an index number to the power of n. So step 2, write all the significant figures of this number. So these 3 zeros are not significant figures. 751 are. So we just have to write 751 first. In step 3, insert a decimal to the right of the first significant figure. Don't forget, it is always here. In step 4, write 10. And in step 5, decide the power of the index. And how do you decide the power of the index? Where is the new decimal point? It is between 7 and 5. So the new decimal point is here, and the original decimal point is on the left. So when you move to the original point, you are taking 1, 2, and 3 steps to the left. And therefore, it will be negative 3. So this is the difference between numbers that are greater than 1 and numbers that are less than 1. Remember then, for numbers greater than 1, the index for the number in base 10 is always positive. But for numbers that are less than 1, the index number is always negative. And now let's look at our second example, 0.8134. What kind of number is this? Greater than 1 or less than 1? One look, it is less than 1. So it belongs to type 2. Don't forget that the index later will be a negative integer. So the same 5 steps. First one, get ready to prepare the number as a product of 2 parts. Second step, write all the significant figures. You know by now that 0 is not a significant figure, so there are only 4 significant figures. Write all of them down first. Third step, insert a decimal to the right of the first digit. And step 4, write 10. And lastly, decide the power of the index. And the power of the index is decided by moving the decimal point from its new place, which is between 8 to 1, which means it will be here, to its original place, which is 1 to the left. So when you move 1 place to the left, it is negative 1. So actually moving the decimal points to the right will result in a positive integer, and moving the decimal points to the left will result in a negative integer. Alright, so now the 5 steps, rewrite it into the product of 2 parts. Second step, make sure the first part contains all the significant figures of the number. In step 3, insert the decimal on the right of the first digit. In step 4, the second part is an index of base 10. And step 5, decide the power of the index number. Alright, so now we have covered 2 kinds of number, which is the first one, numbers greater than 1. Second type, numbers less than 1. What about numbers between 1 and 10? The power of the index number is always a 0. For example, express the following numbers in the standard form. Alright, number 1, 6.78. Alright, this is already a number between 1 and 10. So in order to just write it into the standard form way of writing, since it is between 1 and 10, we don't have to move the decimal points right or left. It is just 6.78 times 10 to the power of 0. This is a formality of writing this number in the standard form. And secondly, 1.234, and this is already a number between 1 to 10, so we don't have to move the decimals to the right or to the left. Since it's already then, just write it as a product of that number and 10 to the power of 0. Alright, now, why don't you test yourself? Express each of the following numbers in standard form. Number 1. Can you write 7,801 in standard form? It is 7.801 times 10 to the power of 3. 0.0005402. We have learned that this is a number in type 2. It is less than 1. So when you convert it to standard form, the index will be negative. And what would it be in standard form? 5.402 times 10 to the power of negative 4. Alright, what about expressing 30,100 in standard form? Alright, after the 5 steps, 3.01 times 10 to the power of 4. Alright, let's look at exercise 2. Round off 0.006127 to 3 significant figures. Hence, state your answer in standard form. Alright, let's look at the board for this question. Alright, this is actually a combination of the 2 lessons that we have learned before this. Significant figures and now standard form. So you are required to first of all round off this number to 3 significant figures and then change it to standard form. So if you remember, 3 significant figures, these 3 are not significant figures. 1, 2, 3. Look at the next digit. It is 5 or more because it is 7. And because it is bigger than 5, we have to add 1 to the last underlined digit. So once we round it off to 3 significant figures, it will be 0.00613. And don't forget to write the number of significant figures. But sometimes we still need to convert it to standard form. Why? Because there are many zeros in the front. So let's convert it now to standard form. And don't forget, when you convert to standard form, you must know the 5 steps which we have discussed early on. First step, get ready, a product of 2 parts. Second step, rewrite all the number of significant figures. Third step, put a decimal on the right of the first digit. Fourth step, get ready with the base of 10. And lastly, step 5, decide the power of the index. And how to decide it? We have put the decimal here. Remember, to decide it, check whether you need to move right or left to its original decimal point. And its original decimal point is on the left of the new decimal point. So you are moving towards the left for 1, 2, and 3 places. So when you move backwards 3 places, the index is negative. So there's the answer there. 6.13 times 10 to the power of negative 3. Alright, now, express the following numbers in the standard form. Alright, our final exercise for today. Another 3 numbers to be rounded off to the standard form of writing a number. Why don't you try it? Alright, now, I'm sure you have your solutions with you. Let's just check it once again. Alright students, now we have 3 numbers which are original numbers and we want to convert it to standard form. And don't forget, what is standard form? A way of writing numbers in a standard way, which is we have discussed early on. Alright, now in A, 0.01204. So now you have already known whether you must check, is this a number that is greater or less than 1? A is a number which is less than 1. So how do you write it? Rewrite all the significant figures. Remember, these 2 zeros are not significant figures. there are only 4 significant figures. Next step, put the decimal on the right hand of the first digit. The number in base 10 comes, and decide the power of the index. Alright, now we have put the decimal here. How do we move back to its original decimal point? 1 place to the left, 2 places to the left. So when you move back to the left, it is negative index. 2 places to the left, negative 2. In B, what kind of number is this? 32.14, it is larger than 1. So if you remember, the index number for base 10, for any number which is larger than 1, will always be positive. So keep in mind as we rewrite it in standard form. First step, all the significant figures must be there without the point. Next step, remember this point must always be on the right hand side of the first decimal, because this whole number must be between 1 and 10. Get ready with the base 10 and decide the index number, which we know is always positive for any number greater than 1. So where have we put the decimal in its new place? Between 3 and 2. And its original decimal point is 1 to the right. So move to its original point to the right, and you need to move only 1 place. So it is 3.214 times 10 to the power of 1. And in C, obviously a very large number which is bigger than 1. So the index number for C will also be positive. First step, all the numbers are significant figures, so write them all. Second step, always remember, fill in the decimal to the right, and then rewrite 10, and lastly decide the index number. So we have put the decimal point in its new place, which is here. Don't forget, in numbers like this, the original decimal point is actually at the back. So move back to its original point, and how many places do you need to move? 1 to the right, 2 to the right, 3 and 4 places to the right. So all these 3 numbers have been converted to a standard way of writing numbers, which is called the standard form. Remember, they are the same numbers. The only thing that is different is the form of writing it. So the exercise just now concludes our lesson for today. So students, what have we learned again today? Let's recap. Today, we have looked at the standard form of writing any number. And what is the use of standard form? It is very useful, especially in writing numbers that are extremely big. For example, remember the distance between planets, or numbers that are extremely small. For instance, the size of a virus. So these kind of numbers can be written in a standard way of writing it. So I hope you enjoyed today's lesson. We'll see you in the next one. Thank you.